Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock, and we are live. Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock, and we are live. Welcome to V-Talks. I'm so glad you could join us this evening because tonight we're going to talk about inflammation and cellular health. And what better person to help us understand what this all means is Dr. Michael Wild. He is a regular physician that is on our show every month. And he is a chiropractic functional medicine practitioner and a certified inflammation and detoxification specialist. So we're going to bring him onto the stream right now, and he's going to help us understand inflammation. Hi.
Hey there.
That is a hard word. I had the detoxification.
So you could just say toxicity for sure.
Oh, I don't know. That might seem harder. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, Michael, I would love it if you could talk to our viewers a little bit about how you got into all this. I know you've been on the show before, but for the viewers that have not met you before, can you talk a little bit about what you do and your journey?
Sure. I started out as a chiropractic physician 30 years ago, which makes me feel really old when I say that, but it just means I have more years of experience and wisdom, right?
Right.
About 15 years into it, I started to notice that my patients were not staying as well as long as they used to, and I started to look for commonalities that might be affecting that, and that's when I started to really incorporate more nutrition into my practice, not just the neurologic of chiropractic. From there, I started to notice that even then, what was good for one person wasn't necessarily good for another. And I started to really understand a lot more about biochemical individuality and why nutrition is important for people in different ways. And then that led me down the rabbit hole of what I eventually understood to be functional medicine. So I was practicing that for about 15 years and didn't know it. So functional medicine is when we approach the body from balancing its systems rather than treating its symptoms, right? So your chiropractor could do it, your nutritionist, your MD, your acupuncturist. We're all going to use different tools to rebalance you according to our particular perspective, but we're going to look at you differently. We're not going to treat your symptoms. We're going to balance your systems so your body can heal itself from the inside out. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much what medicine's supposed to be, but we've more or less allowed our conventional medicine system to become a symptom treating system. So we've kind of gotten away from what real healthcare is. Yeah. So functional medicine is making this kind of rise. And so you'll see a lot more about it. If you just Google it, you'll find a ton of info on it. So right around that time, my own wife was diagnosed in 2001 with what we will call potential breast cancer. And we say potential because she had a lump in her breast. Her breasts are always fibrocystic, so we knew that there'd be lumps all the time. There was one that was particularly large that never changed, was there for at least 10 years. And we decided to get it biopsied, and it came back as cancer. But they weren't 100% sure about the full nature of it, so we sent that same tissue to 3 different labs. One said it was cancer, one said it wasn't, one said maybe. So what are you supposed to do with that, right? So they convinced her to remove the lump and then to get radiation therapy. And that radiation therapy she received caused a separate second cancer called angiosarcoma. And it's caused from radiation therapy. It takes 10 years to develop. So exactly 10 years later, we found it. We found it a year before it was properly diagnosed. And by the time it was diagnosed, they said, we don't know how you're even alive. 90% of people will be dead within 3 months from this appearing. And you guys found it a year ago. Yeah. So they said, about 7% of people live 2 years. About 3% of people live 2.5 years. No one lives beyond that. So I changed my gears completely in practice, as you might imagine. What you would do, you've got to look for an answer, right? Yeah. So I started studying immunotherapy. I started getting deeper into functional medicine. I started to look at the what was known about cancer versus so much that's unknown. But what do we know? And we do know that all cancer starts at the cellular level. And so I started studying cellular health and what makes cell health go wrong, which is inflammation and toxicity. And that's why we're going to talk about inflammation tonight. So the top expert in the country told my wife that she would not live more than 3 months at that point. And we opted not to do any of the treatments they recommended because they didn't have a great track record or outcome. And I started using the things that I was learning to put together protocols for her. And she lived 18 times as long as they said she would. Wow. She lived 3.5 years. I did ultimately lose her on October 1st, 6 years ago. And I decided to devote my practice to that type of care so I could try to help people long before they got to the point where I had started with her. Yeah. By the time I started with her, the cancer was spread through her entire body. It was in every bone in her body except for 2 vertebrae. She had 7 tumors in her liver. She had a tumor in her collarbone that was so large she could rest her head on it. She had a tumor in her pelvis the size of a volleyball. It was insane. And that's when I started to work with her. And so just the fact that she had a great quality of life for another 3.5 years made me happy. Yeah. Not as happy as another 30 years, but made me happy. And that's why I do what I do now. So I've opened a very unique cellular health center in Richmond, Virginia, that combines my chiropractic neurologic care, which connects brain to body, with functional medicine, which connects cell to cell. And I also incorporate biohacking. I'm an avid biohacker, which means using scientific shortcuts to rapidly improve your health and performance. So I use cool tools and technology like psychoacoustic sound frequency, cold laser therapy, a whole bunch of different stuff that I use to really shorten the learning curve for the body so you heal much faster. Yeah. So things that would typically take a year or two to achieve, we can usually do in about 6 months in our practice. Wow. And that's what I do now. So I've kind of created my own unique blend of those things that I coined a term. I call it biofunctional chiropractic. So it's something brand new. It's a word I made up. Why not? And right. And I like it. And I'm hitting my own computer. Sorry.
I like it too.
Yeah. So that's where I am. That's what I do.
Well, so tonight we're going to talk about inflammation. So my first question is, what is it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So inflammation is the reaction the body has to an injury or an invading organism. And it's a process by which blood floods the area with certain biochemicals in order to get rid of something that doesn't belong and heal tissue that's been damaged, right? So it's going to bring white blood cells to kill off an invading organism like a bacteria, a virus, or a parasite. If you cut yourself, you're going to have inflammation where it's going to come in to heal that damaged tissue. And actually, the funny thing is the inflammation also brings chemicals with it that produce pain, so you won't move the area. It's trying to heal. Stop using me, is what your body is telling you. So when you hurt yourself, it's not the injury that hurts, it's the healing that hurts.
Oh, that's interesting. So, I hear a lot in the media and just throughout my circles that inflammation is a bad thing, but is it? I mean, the way you're describing it right now, it's important, right?
Right. So in and of itself, It's not a bad thing. If you didn't have inflammation, you would die pretty quickly from a lot of different things we come in contact with exposure. So acute inflammation is short-term inflammation where the body rushes the chemistry in, fights off the bad guys, heals the cut, and then shuts off and moves out. That's perfectly fine. That's what we want. But chronic inflammation is when that acute inflammation doesn't turn off for some reason. Yeah. And we define chronic as anything that lasts 3 months or more. So if you've had that chronic shoulder pain for more than 3 months and it's always hurting, that's inflammation. And that inflammation is causing destruction of the joint, which then causes arthritis. So arthritis is, itis means inflammation, arth means joint. So arthritis is inflammation of the joint. But it doesn't go away. So that's a chronic problem. And then we have things like overwhelming acute inflammation, which can also be bad, like we're seeing with COVID, when people have what we're calling a cytokine storm. Cytokines are a chemical of inflammation. But in the case of COVID, the body is hyperreacting, and that overreaction causes damage too. So it's kind of like dropping a bomb on something that required a pistol, you know?
What are some other diseases that are associated with inflammation?
So all of the chronic top 5 diseases that are killing everyone in America: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, obviously, Alzheimer's and dementia, and autoimmune dysfunction. And there's over 150 autoimmune diseases, everything from eczema, allergies, or asthma, all the way out to lupus or multiple sclerosis.
So can you describe the term, the autoimmune? Like, what does that mean?
Sure. And let me just say, if you see me moving back and forth, because I have a little dog in my lap, and I'm petting him to keep him quiet. So if it looks like I'm doing some weird motion, no, I don't have an autoimmune disorder myself. It's because I'm petting my dog. Okay. Just want to get that out of the way because I see my head doing a weird thing. Okay.
No,
So autoimmune.
I always do weird things on here. I don't know. I
So
was praying a
autoimmune-
couple weeks ago. I told you my dog was, usually I have a babysitter. My dog was in the shot and I was just praying to God, like, please don't
Right.
be on the floor. Please don't.
And I'm going to give a disclaimer too. My big dog's in the background. If another dog walks past the house, he's going to bark like crazy. We're all just going to have to wait. Right.
It's
So let's
live
go-
and it's real and it's fun. And
Right,
if you
that's-
have animals, you get it, or children.
Hey, it's VTalks. It's just a conversation.
It's just
So,
a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
about
So
ourselves.
autoimmune. What is autoimmune?
Yeah.
So we all know what immune means, right? That's your body's surveillance and healing and repair system that is going to fight off a bad guy or heal damaged tissues, right? So your immune system doesn't just destroy bad guys. It actually is what repairs any damage that takes place in your body throughout the day. It removes toxic proteins from your brain so you don't develop Alzheimer's, which it does mainly when you sleep. So that's what the immune system is. Auto means self, right? So like an autobiography. I'm writing a biography about myself. So autoimmune means when your immune system attacks your own tissues and it doesn't recognize the difference between self and non-self.
Yeah.
And that can happen for various different reasons. Chronic inflammation can eventually trigger that, as well as toxicity can trigger that.
Okay. So now we've talked about what these things are. So what causes chronic inflammation?
So the most common cause is diet.
Okay.
So because that's the most common thing we come in contact with every day is the food we choose to put into our body, right? So toxins can cause it too, but those may be few or far between, or it may be everyday stuff you're exposed to. For example, if you have silver fillings in your mouth, they're not made of silver.
Right.
They're called silver fillings because they look silver, but that's an amalgam. It's 54% mercury, which is an extremely potent neurotoxin,
Sure.
mixed with other things like nickel. Okay, so that amalgam, it's a little point of contention where the American Dental Association says it's perfectly fine as long as that amalgam is intact and that nothing causes that mercury to leak. Yet they also tell you that what would cause the mercury to leak would be friction or warmth. So every time you eat a hot meal, is that what we're saying?
Chewing?
Right? Right.
You're chewing?
So yes,
Like
that's
a
been
steak
shown.
and it's hot?
Exactly.
Friction?
So it's been shown that will actually cause more mercury vapors to get released. They get absorbed through the mucous membranes of your mouth. And mercury, for example, likes to hunker down in the brain and the heart and the kidneys. And so when we look at autopsies of people who die of heart disease and kidney disease and brain disorders, we often find an abundance of mercury in those tissues that we probably would have to assume had something to do with that.
Wow.
Lead, which can be in your walls. If you live in a house built before 1978, there was a lot of lead in the paint back then, even in the sheetrock. And so if you ever lived in a house built before 1978, which I have, then you've absorbed some of that lead just because you breathed it in, and lead likes to hunker down in your bones. And what's interesting about that is for lead to go in, something has to come out. And what happens is the body kicks calcium out to put lead in. And so lead accumulation can be one reason why we develop osteoporosis, which is losing calcium, leaching calcium from your bones.
Wow.
So it's interesting. So there's toxins in the environment. But getting back to what I said originally, the biggest thing is your food. And there's a lot of toxins in that food. There's a lot of crap in there, right?
Other words you can't pronounce. If you
Right. Exactly. Right. And you hear, Your safest bet is if that package, if you read the label and it contains 5 ingredients or less, and you can pronounce every one of them, it's safer to eat, right? But if it's got all of these crazy words in there, all these chemicals, now some of them are chemical forms of natural substances, and that's okay. Like stevia, for example, which is a natural plant-based sweetener that a lot of people have chosen to use instead of sugar, but the ingredient may say Reb A or Rebundiana, which is the actual name of the herb, but that's stevia. So not every big word is bad, but general rule of thumb, most are. Okay, because most of the packaged foods that we consume are really not foods at all. They're what I call frankenfoods, or man-made food-like substances.
Right.
Because really the definition of a food is that which you ingest, which ultimately gives you nourishment, like meaning vitamins and minerals in a natural form, that leads to the healing, repair, and regeneration of your tissues. I don't think a Twinkie does that.
Well,
Right?
and I mean, when I was growing up and my parents were like, well, if you can buy it at the grocery store, it must be safe. It must be okay, I
Right?
mean, I don't think
Right.
anyone meant to feed us Twinkies. It was just if it's there. I think people just assume everything's safe at the store.
And look how different the grocery store shelves are today compared to our parents' or our grandparents' day.
Sure.
Like now we have to search out organic food, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, what did they label or call organic food in our grandparents' day? They called it food
Yeah.
because
True.
everything was grown organically. Now it's grown with so much genetic modification and chemical pesticides and fertilizers and herbicides that we're ingesting poison on top of poison. And our bodies really can't tolerate that real well. So a lot of it gets stored away because our system is not ready for 1,000 things to come in. It can handle 100 things. And so it gets stored away in the form of fat. So your body will sequester these toxins in little fat globules, and then it will store that fat in your bloodstream, called triglycerides, and it'll store it in your fat tissues, especially your abdomen. And so a lot of the reason why we carry some excess belly fat is because of toxic overload that we can't process.
Yeah. And we talked about that on our last show, and I think we're going to touch upon it a little bit more later on because for the viewers that didn't catch the show before, there's a lot of really good information.
Right.
When you were talking about trans fats, so I actually, to our viewers, I'm actually working with Dr. Wild right now. I'm doing several tests on myself to try and make sure that my body is operating mechanically correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
that I
Biochemically correct?
Biochemically correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have a couple tests results that I've gotten in today, right?
Correct.
So you're gonna tell me. We've done one test. I've got another test that hasn't come back in yet. But can you tell our viewers what we're going to talk about today? And I'm going to learn myself what's going on.
Sure. So going back to what I said earlier about why I got into all this and how I started studying cancer at the cellular level.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that all disease starts with your cells.
Yeah.
So your body's made up of trillions of cells. And if your cells aren't well, you're not well. But if you save your cells, you save yourself. Right?
Yes.
So cells come together to form tissues. Tissues come together to form organs and glands. Organs and glands come together to form systems, and systems come together to form you. So if you're noticing a symptom, that's going to be happening at the system level. I have digestive symptoms. I have neurologic symptoms, right? Those are at the system level, but where do they start? They didn't start at the system level. They started all the way back down at the cellular level. Mm-hmm. So with every patient I deal with, whether they have recurrent colds or cancer, the first thing I do is look at their cellular health. Because if we start there and build up from there, they get better much faster rather than trying to chase the dog's tail that's wagging and trying to treat all those symptoms of the systems that went wrong. We're going all the way back down, making sure that dog was fed properly. Okay.
Yeah, and
treated properly.
I reached out to you because I couldn't lose this belly fat. And
Right.
those who know me know that I felt like I was eating really well. I am a pescatarian, I don't eat meat or chicken or, pork. I work out 5 days a week, and my body was changing and just holding on to fat. And I just felt like something was wrong. So I reached out to you and you said, well, we can fix this.
Yep.
Right. So
Exactly.
we're
Yeah.
on our way to that.
We are.
So,
We're on the first step. So I've
okay.
created a system of healing that I
Yeah.
call the cellular healing cycle.
Yeah.
And that cellular healing cycle has 5 steps.
Yeah.
And if I can take a minute to explain them, if
Yep.
you don't mind. So the first step is, guess what? Inflammation, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. And maybe it'd be fun to have each episode be on a different step or something like that. But
Yeah. I love it.
so inflammation is number 1 at both the cellular level and the systemic, which means whole body level. So whole body inflammation starts at the cell. If you don't correct it at the cell, it grows to affect the whole body, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're going to talk about is that you did a cellular health and inflammation test for me. And that was a finger prick blood test, very easy to do. You did it right at your own home with a kit I sent you. Yeah. And for $99, we can probably do one of the most important tests anyone can do in their lifetime to find out how healthy their cells are. Because if you're not addressing that, nothing else you do is really going to help you completely heal yourself. In the long run, as a matter of fact, you're probably going to waste a lot of time and money.
All right. So which one are we going to talk about first?
Okay. So when we kind of skipped over a little bit about food causing inflammation. Oh. So I just wanted, if I can, just shove that right back in real quick. So we talked about toxins, but the 2 things in food that cause the most inflammation are sugar and trans fats. And that's how we got into trans fats, right? Yeah. Now, sugar isn't just sugar. It's simple carbohydrates that convert to sugar. Okay. Right? Protein converts to sugar. Vegetables convert to sugar. Mm-hmm. Fruits convert to sugar. Sugar converts to sugar. Okay? Yeah. So not all sugar is created equal, not all sugar is bad. But when you eat an apple, that sugar bound in its natural form to all the natural fiber found within an apple slows down its absorption rate, and your body is able to handle that. It doesn't have the crazy hormone flux that happens when we have something that is a simple carbohydrate with really nothing but a lot of sugar, right? That creates a very different response in our body. So we may have all heard of something that diabetics have to deal with, right? Where they're looking at the amount of sugar in their body and looking at their glucose levels, right? And we have something called an index and a volume meter. So the index is talking about how much sugar is in that item, and the volume of it is how fast it gets metabolized by your body, right? So there are different ways of looking at sugar. So it's not quite that simple. We can talk more about that probably on another day if you want to. But suffice it to say, try to always eat things that are higher fiber relative to the amount of carbohydrates, so it can help the body absorb that more slowly, right? So you don't have this rush of sugar that creates a rush of hormone release that leads to not only fat storage, but damage of your tissues. It causes a fast burn, just like burning wood. There's lots of smoke. The smoke is damaging. And so the sugar that we burn quickly causes a lot of cellular inflammation due to all the smoke damage. Okay? So it actually
your processed foods.
Yeah.
Bread.
Yep.
Bread's the devil, isn't it?
So if you're inflamed, it is, right? Because you are just adding fuel to the fire. Even if it's whole wheat, even if it's organic whole wheat, even if it's organic multigrain, it's still going to convert very rapidly to sugar. So I may have mentioned this last time, but 2 slices of organic whole wheat bread convert to more sugar and faster in your bloodstream than a can of Pepsi, which is kind of nuts if you think about that.
A friend of mine asked me a question about bread. She said there's a bread that's made with seeds.
Right. So there's different kinds of bread, and some are sprouted breads, like Ezekiel bread and things like that have a lot of seeds that have been sprouted, and those are healthier for you in terms of nutrient density, but those are still going to be made from grains, which ultimately convert to sugar. Okay. But there are grain-free breads you can get that are based like on coconut flour and almond flour and taro root and cassava and tiger nut. So there's all kinds of different flowers if you look for them. And there's more available today than there's ever been in history because more and more people are becoming aware of this. So certain types of diets like the paleo diet or the ketogenic diet have become very popular because they start to get you to avoid the predominance of these simple carbohydrates. So your inflammation comes down, so your hormones balance, so you become healthier and you lose weight, which is a nice side benefit. But you also do things like protect yourself from cancer and heart disease. Now, that being said, I do find that if you're on any of those kinds of diets long term, it gets really tough because you're not getting a good blend of all the nutrients out there, and you have to be really particular to work hard to get the right blend. And a lot of people simply don't do that. They take the easy way, and they start to not feel well. So they call it the keto flu, for example, right? Because you're not getting the right mineral density. So you have to know how to do it right or cycle. And that's where I create a very specific diet or eating plan, I like to say, because I don't like the word diet because there's a word die in it. So I don't like that. But I have a very particular eating plan that I've created that I think gets the best of all worlds of the most popular diets out there: paleo, pescatarian, keto, and vegetarian, and done in a very specific way to get the best outcome without the drawbacks. And I call it the Cellular Healing Anti-Inflammatory Rotation eating plan. So cellular healing anti-inflammatory rotation is CHAIR. So I call it the CHAIR eating plan, right? And this is how we actually go about fixing inflammation. So I'll get back into that after we talk about your test results.
Okay. I'm nervous.
Okay. So you want to dive into it? All right.
What are we going to talk about first? Am I okay?
Well, the first, yes and no. Okay. You're not the worst I've seen. You're not the best I've seen. You're in a little bit of a danger zone for tissue breakdown, for developing some diseases of cellular inflammation. But I can show you how to very easily turn that completely around in just 3 months. Okay. So if you do exactly what I ask you to do in 3 months where you do this test, I can almost guarantee you're going to be in the normal range if you do what I ask you to do. I say almost because sometimes there are genetic factors and other things that come into play that we can't change that quickly. We can still often change them through what we call epigenetic triggers, which are using the right nutrients and lifestyle to turn on good genes and turn off bad genes, which you have a lot more control over than you realize. But that does take 6 months to a year to often do. But for most people, I'd say 90% of people to 95% of people, we can get them back in a normal range in just 3 months. All right. Okay. So let's talk about your test. So we did a cellular health and inflammation test. And on that test, we were looking at what fats were present in your cell external membrane. So the cell's external membrane is like the cell's skin. You have an external membrane, it's your skin. It's holding all the good stuff inside. It's also keeping bad stuff out, right? So we have pores that absorb things and release sweat, but they don't let big bad bugs in if we're doing our job correctly, right? And one of the pet peeves I have about what's going on in the world right now is I keep telling everybody to use hand sanitizer. And that to me is an awful idea because the microbes that live on your skin naturally, which is your skin's microbiome, protect you by crowding out other invaders. Okay, so they live there and they're not going to let the bad guy move in. Now, if you wipe them all out by using hand sanitizer all the time, you just open the door to let bad guys in. Okay, so a lot of people who are in jobs have to wash their hands frequently. Like my wife was a preschool teacher. She washed her hands all day long and very frequently had fungus between her fingers, under her rings, because she wiped off all the natural bacteria, viruses, and other things that live there that would crowd the fungus out. And she used hand sanitizer all day long because she couldn't have time to go back over to the sink and wash her hand with just good old soap and water. So they had hand sanitizer at every table. You know, you're working with 2- and 3-year-olds, you're cleaning your hands a lot, right? So she would develop these fungal infections on her hands. She's like, I don't get it. What is this? I've never, and that's why. Well, we're not really protecting ourselves from a virus if we wipe off our natural immunity. That's why we were told from the beginning, the best thing is just good old soap and water. But of course, right away, we got right past that because hand sanitizer is a lot easier to have in my car. Yeah. Right? So I'm not really sure how to go off on that tangent, but Back to where we were. Okay. So we talked about the cell membrane and skin. So the unique thing about your cells is the membrane, and by the way, my dog just popped up. Hello. Okay. So the membrane is not just the skin, but it's actually the brain of the cell as well. So you might remember, when I was in school, we were taught that the cell inside it had a center part called the nucleus. And the nucleus contained your genetic material or DNA and RNA, and that was the brain of the cell, and that wasn't really true. We later found out that that was not where the decisions were made. If we think of brain meaning where the decisions are made, right? So it's very important. It contains the genetic material that tells a cell what its job is. You're a heart cell. You're a muscle cell. And the RNA tells a cell how to reproduce, make new heart cells, make new muscle cells, right? And there's other tiny organs called organelles inside that cell that are making that cell function every day, just like you have organs. You have a heart, you have a stomach, you have intestines that make you function. Every cell has its own organs, things called ribosomes and mitochondria. There's all kinds of little organelles in there. The decisions that tell those organelles how to work and tells those genes how to do their job actually comes from the external cell membrane. So picture if you were the cell and your skin was a membrane, your skin would have little antennae sticking out of it all over the place, listening for signals from your environment. If the wind blew a certain way, that would trigger an antenna and tell your cell to do something. If a certain pollen molecule came through in that wind and attached to an antenna, it would tell your cell to do something else. If water splashed your antenna, it would tell your body to do something else. So these antennae are listening for information from their environment. And those antennae are called receptors. Okay? And when you have a normal healthy cell, the receptors are hearing signals from your immune system, hearing signals from nutrients to get in and waste to get out, hearing cells from insulin, open the door, let the fuel in, let your cell create energy, which happens in the mitochondria. So your hormones give signals to your cells through these antennae or receptors. So these are extremely important. If your receptors aren't working or become resistant to hearing the signals, then you can't be well. As a matter of fact, a good example of that is diabetes. Diabetes doesn't just happen overnight, right? So diabetes develops first as something that we call insulin resistance. Insulin's the hormone that tells a cell how to use the sugar for fuel. Insulin resistance is when the antenna gets bent or blocked and can't hear the insulin. So it doesn't let the sugar in. We call that diabetes, right? So you have over 600 hormones. So when you can't hear another hormone, something else happens to you. Like you develop Alzheimer's, which, by the way, is type 3 diabetes. So, right, so it's diabetes of the brain. So type 1 is when your pancreas stops making insulin. You could be born that way, or something could happen to you. You could be exposed to a horrible toxin. You could have a trauma damage your pancreas. But when that happens, that makes your pancreas shut down. And when that happens, we call it type 1 diabetes. Type 2 is most common, and that's when we beat the crap out of our pancreas by consuming too much sugar and simple carbohydrates, which causes inflammation to our cells. So the membrane's receptors get blunted and become resistant. So what happens when we become resistant? Well, then the pancreas starts to produce more insulin. Oh, you're not going to like the amount I'm making? Let me give you more. Let me give you more. Let me give you more. And it starts flooding the cells with insulin, but the cells are still resistant, so it doesn't matter. So the pancreas ultimately burns itself out, and that's what we call type 2 diabetes, which is the most common form of diabetes that we see throughout America and throughout the world now, because we as Americans are really great people. We get to share things like McDonald's with the rest of the world, right? So my daughter was in Switzerland for a year recently as a nanny, an au pair in the Alps, and I went to visit her. And I was so excited to be in Switzerland. I couldn't wait to see this culture. And I come up out of the train station, and the first thing I see in Geneva is Starbucks next to Dunkin' Donuts, next to McDonald's.
Right.
You know, I'm like, good Lord, what are we doing? What are we doing to the rest of the world, right? So fast food is killing us, you know? There's not a single item on McDonald's menu, including the French fries, that does not contain added sugar. Every single thing contains added sugar. unless you get an unsweet tea. Okay? And that is because they're no dummies. They know that sugar is the most addictive molecule that we know of. It's more addictive than cocaine, more addictive than heroin. They've done studies where they give rats cocaine, heroin, get them fully addicted, then introduce sugar, and once they taste it, they never go back for the cocaine and heroin, and they will kill the rat next to them to get the sugar. Okay? Pretty crazy. And the food industry knows that well. So that's a big part of why our food contains so much sugar. Okay? So sugar is the number one thing that causes cell inflammation. The number two thing is bad fats. And we talk about trans fats, and trans fats are anything that uses the words hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oil. And you have to be aware that the food industry has lobbied the FDA to allow the food industry to lie on labels. Money talks. So if a package says 0 grams trans fats, you cannot believe that. That can be a complete lie. You always have to flip it. It's disgusting to me. It really is. I don't know what's happened to our country. There is absolutely no integrity in these industries. I don't get it. And they're certainly not out for our health, right? They're out for next quarter's profits at your expense. Yeah. So you have to flip that package, and you have to look at the actual ingredients. And no matter what it says on the front, if you see the words hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated, that is a trans fat. And a trans fat damages your cell membranes very quickly, okay, and causes major inflammatory problems with the cell membrane. And when that cell membrane becomes inflamed, not only can it not hear the hormones and the immune system properly, but you can't get your vitamins and minerals in, and you can't get your waste out nearly as well as you're supposed to. So that cell is going to become sick, and eventually that cell is going to die. And if enough cells die, a tissue dies. If enough tissues die, an organ or gland dies. And if organs and glands die, a system dies, and then you die, right? So that's where it all starts. And most of the time, it's 5 to 20 years in the making before you have a symptom. So symptoms are the last stage of this process. And when you start treating someone, it's the first thing to go away. So if that's step number 10, and you're working from step number 10 backwards, the first thing you're going to do is the symptom's going to go away. And our traditional medical system stops right there. You feel good? Great. You're cured. Come back when it bothers you again, right? And if you look on the package of any medication, 99% of them say for the temporary relief of. It never says for the permanent cure of.
No.
Right? Because if the drugs worked, you never have to take them again. Right? So we've allowed that. We've accepted that. We've adopted that. Okay? So that's on us. And the only way that's going to change is if we stop accepting it. And we take health into our own hands, because it's our body. It's our health. It has to be taken into our own hands. So I don't let anybody plead ignorance. Okay? I'm sorry, that's not an excuse in my book. There is so much info available, and with the web, there is no way you can't learn the proper way to take care of yourself. But I do know, in talking with hundreds if not thousands of patients, there's massive confusion about what is the right way. Because a lot of what we're told in mainstream really is very outdated, old information, like hearing that cholesterol is bad or high cholesterol is a major problem, and that just if your cholesterol is a certain number, say above 175, we're going to call that bad. That's completely incorrect. And that's been proven over 100 times in different research studies over the last 50 years, and it's still being taught. And that entire idea is still being propagated, that cholesterol is evil. And then I laugh when they say, stop eating eggs or fatty foods, when only 10% of what you're actually measuring in your bloodstream actually comes from your diet. 90% is made from your liver. So why would your liver make a bunch of cholesterol? What's up with that? Well, cholesterol is one of your number one anti-inflammatories. Oh, yeah. So cholesterol heals your cell membranes. As a matter of fact, I said, hey, your cell membranes are made up of fats. Cholesterol is one of the major fats that makes your cell membranes. If you didn't have cholesterol, you would die. And we talked about all those hormones, over 600 hormones. About 90% of those are made from cholesterol. Cholesterol is the building block that makes hormones. So I was actually just talking to my brother about this, because he was having some concerns about some possible heart-related issues. And so he was reading off his lab numbers to me, And his doctor said, your cholesterol is fantastic. We don't have to worry about that. And it was actually below 150. And that's actually worrisome to me because every medical textbook I ever learned from going through school said anything below 150 and your body will not be able to properly make hormones. Okay. So lower, just for the sake of being lower, does not mean better. Okay. There's a range. And ideally, I think most people need to be around 175 in their cholesterol. If you're battling an inflammatory disorder, we're naturally going to see it pushing 200, even 250, because your cholesterol is trying to create the chemistry to heal that inflammation. Even when we talk about cholesterol clogging arteries, everyone says, well, if cholesterol is too high, that's a problem. Yes and no. It has to be a certain form of cholesterol, and it has to be in combination with other things to really be a problem. So when we look at cholesterol, we know that the average lab test breaks it down to two things we call HDL and LDL. And HDL we call good cholesterol, and LDL we call bad cholesterol. And those are both, again, misnomers. Neither is good or bad. They both serve a very important purpose. It's when they get significantly out of balance that it's a problem. Okay. It's about the ratio. And we're going to talk more about ratios when we get to your test results. Okay. So HDLs are the body carrying used cholesterol back to the liver for processing, to be broken down. So we naturally say if those numbers are high, it means your body's breaking down cholesterol. We call that good. LDLs are the cholesterol being sent out from the liver to heal parts of your body. So we say, well, if those numbers are high, that's bad. Well, it doesn't just mean the LDLs are bad. It means there's high inflammation somewhere. So those numbers have to go up because the cholesterol is trying to get there to heal it. So the question shouldn't be, how do we stop the cholesterol? The question should be, how do we stop the inflammation that's calling the cholesterol to come in, right? And let's talk about your arteries for a second as an example. The greatest fear we have about cholesterol is it building up too much, hardening or oxidizing, breaking off into a plaque that then gets lodged in an artery that goes to our brain and causes a stroke, or to our heart or lungs and causes a heart attack or a pulmonary embolism. So that's why we worry about those blood clots. Well, the way that actually really happens is within LDLs, there are 12 subfractions of LDL, or 12 different kinds of LDL. Only one of those is a problem. So when we're looking at the numbers overall on a lab test, they're not exactly looking at them properly. And the analogy I always use is, if you're driving to work and you're concerned there's going to be a traffic jam ahead and it's going to make you late for work and this is going to be a big problem, you're probably going to get fired. Well, if you're concerned about that traffic jam, are you concerned about the number of people riding in cars or the number of cars on the road? What is it? Tell me. If you're worried about a traffic jam, are you worried about the number of people sitting in the cars or the number of cars on the road?
Number of cars on the road.
Right. Well, when we look at the LDLs, we're looking at the number of people sitting in the cars. Okay? If you want to know the number of cars on the road, you have to look for something called the ApoB to ApoA subfraction. Now, if your ApoB numbers are high, that's more cars on the road. That means we potentially could have a traffic jam. But we also know that we're probably not going to have a big traffic jam unless there's some kind of accident blocking it, or rubbernecking going on, just even if it's on the side of the road and everyone has to slow down and gawk, right? But just because there's a lot of cars moving along, so what? They're moving along. It's only when something stops them. And in our blood vessels, the thing that stops them is called homocysteine. And homocysteine is a protein that builds up between your blood vessel walls and creates a speed bump. So now the cars are piling up against the speed bump, right? So if you have high homocysteine and high ApoB within your cholesterol, now I'm concerned. Now you have a greater risk for actually creating a clot.
Is that the term ischemia?
So ischemia means blockage of blood flow.
Okay.
So if you have a clot that breaks off and completely blocks off the blood vessel and the blood can't go where it's supposed to go, that's ischemia. Okay. So you could have an ischemic stroke, right? The other kind is a hemorrhagic stroke where the blood vessel tears and blood leaks out. Okay. Right? And you can have ischemia in a blood vessel that goes to your heart, and that can cause a heart attack. Right?
Yeah, my dad struggled with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And
He
so
was
that
very, he was very
blockage,
young when he had his first heart attack.
right. So that blockage is coming from those clots that did break off. So in his case, he probably had homocysteine issues. He probably had fibrinogen issues. Fibrinogen is what your body uses to create clots along with platelets. So if your fibrinogen level is high, you're more likely to create clots more easily. Now you also have homocysteine, so there's a big speed bump, and you have more cars on the road. Okay, we got to work together and work fast. Okay, so just looking at cholesterol as a single number doesn't tell you anything.
Right.
Just looking at your LDLs and HDLs by themselves doesn't really tell you much. And a lot of people have genetically high cholesterol. I have patients who have cholesterol in the 300s and 400s. It's not a problem at all for them. It's been that way their entire life, and they have no sign of heart disease or any kind of stroke risk because their body genetically is prepared to deal with that. And the reason that might occur, the reason people have genetically high cholesterol is because your ancestors may have come from an environment that was under a lot of stress that caused them to raise their inflammation levels on a regular basis, which caused their cholesterol to naturally be higher in that family line. So other things that may cause inflammation could be exposure to the elements. If you're burned, if you're freezing cold, right? So if you live in an area that's always sunny, you're getting more sunburn. If you live in an area that's always freezing, your body's going to have to create different chemistry for that, right? Another thing that can also drive that up is if you lived in an area that did not get a lot of sun exposure and was dark more often, you wouldn't get much vitamin D, right? Because we know vitamin D gets produced from the sun. Well, vitamin D is made from cholesterol. So if your ancestors or you come from an area where there's not a lot of sunlight, your vitamin D levels are naturally lower. Your body wants to make more. It's going to create more cholesterol from your liver so you can make more vitamin D. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you supplement with vitamin D, then that won't happen.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So you can help that, especially I crack up when I hear, oh, it's flu season. I'm like, what exactly is flu season? Show me on the calendar. Right? So it's not a season. There's no flu season. There's low vitamin D season. Because in the fall and winter, which we call flu season, is when the sun is no longer in the same orbit. So we don't have the same amount of rays hitting us, and naturally it's colder to us. And we're not going to get out there and get the same sun exposure. Even if we stay out there fully exposed and naked, the rays aren't as strong. So we don't produce as much vitamin D. Vitamin D is extremely important for many different functions of your body, but we all know it's important for immune function. Especially now, we've heard a lot about the importance of vitamin D, right?
Yeah, oh,
So,
for sure. That's actually
right.
one thing I never miss.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
I was
So-
deficient, at one point, so I
Exactly.
took
And the
care of that. Yeah.
vitamin D range on a normal lab test goes from 30 to 100. And most doctors don't even start talking about it till you're 30 or below, when an average healthy vitamin D level should be 50 to 75.
Yeah. I think mine
Right.
was in its 20s. It was terrible.
Right. And that's risky.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I mean, I learned about that. I probably started really supplementing about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I stopped getting sick.
Right. Right.
It was amazing because I was going through this cycle of I just kept catching colds all the time.
I was
And then
just explaining this.
That
Yeah.
went away.
Yeah, it's awesome because vitamin D is, if you think of your immune system as your army, right? And your white blood cells are the foot soldiers, and they do 3/4 of the fight against any invading organism, including things like COVID. So if they can't get the job done, then they call in the tanks and jets, which are the antibodies, right? So, and antibodies can cause a lot of destruction when they come in. They drop bombs, and they'll destroy the invading organism, but it also has harm to us. So we actually don't want a lot of antibodies as much as we want a lot of good white blood cells, because they're really going to do the job with minimal damage. You're not even going to know you're even sick. So the cases of COVID where someone has a mild case or doesn't even know they had it is when their white blood cells fought off and there was no issue. Now, if their white blood cells aren't strong, they're going to have a more serious issue, right? Or if the white blood cells are asleep, there's going to be a more serious issue. And vitamin D is the general that puts the army in motion and controls the army and tells it what to do and wakes it up and shows it where to go. So you can have plenty of white blood cells, but if they don't know where to go or what to do because the general is absent, well, they're not going to be much good, right? So what were we talking about? We go
I
down.
want to know, am I okay? I want my results.
Okay. So there's a lot of
I want my test results. Come
Here's a lot
on.
of background to explain the importance of your cell membranes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So your omega-3s are
Yes.
consider.
Wait, I have a banner. Hold on.
Okay. All right.
That
So
one?
we were measuring your omega-3 index to start with, and your omega-3 fats are the ones that are primarily anti-inflammatory for your body. Okay, so we generally want more of these guys in our diet, and we want more of these guys making up our cell membranes because they're basically going to give us a greater defense. And the analogy I use is if your cell was your home, your omega-3 index is how strong is your front door against bad guys who might want to get in.
Okay.
Okay, so your omega-3 index is measured at that cellular level, and it's actually measured within your red blood cells. It's looking at the membranes of your red blood cells, which are representative of the blood cells throughout your entire body and brain. And if your omega-3 index is above a certain level, we consider it healthy, and that level is 8. Okay? Now, we really like it about 10 or higher, but 8 is the low level of normal. And do I have permission to share your results?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so your number was 6.37. Okay? So what does that mean? Right. That means that you have a weaker front door than we want you to have.
I need some help with my front door.
Right.
I need to call a locksmith.
Because what we're going to say is we
Yeah.
know that there is a mob approaching your house that wants to have a home invasion. They want to rob you.
Yeah.
Okay. So your door is a little weak.
Yeah.
Right. So on the scale, a 10 and above would be a bank vault.
Okay.
8 to 10 would be a steel door.
Yeah.
6 to 10 would be an aluminum door. Okay, like an average screen door.
Yeah, but we
Okay.
want to be a 10.
Right. And then we start going down to wood, balsam wood, paper mache.
Okay. I'm not
Okay.
there, am I?
Right.
It's not
Right.
that
You're not
bad.
there. Now, I'll tell you something that's very interesting about this test is research came out in one of my favorite journals called Prostaglandins, Leukotrienes, and Essential Fatty Acids. I'm sure everybody reads that one. But that particular journal had a published study that showed that your resistance to COVID was very much tied into your omega-3 index.
More than vitamin D or a combination?
Right. So all these things are important to fight it off, but how you're going to initially get impacted had to do with how strong was your cell's door, right? Because in that mob is a virus like COVID coming to get in, all right? So you want that door strong to prevent that from happening. Right. So if you are below 5.7, you're much more likely to have a severe case or even die. If you're above 5.7, you're much more likely to have a mild to moderate case. So you're in that moderate case range if you were to get COVID, okay? Now, we'd like to see you 8 or above, which would be a mild. 10 or above, you wouldn't even know you even had it.
Okay. So tell me what I need to do to change that number.
So it's really easy.
Okay.
Eat fish. Guess what? You're a pescatarian. You already eat fish, and your number's not great.
I know, but I don't eat a lot of fish, though.
Okay.
I don't like killing things.
I understand. Well, you can eat them live. My mom
That's true.
in college told me that story.
So what would a vegetarian do to get omega-3s? Like
algae. Okay. So algae is also very rich in, and the omega-3s we're particularly interested in, and flaxseed oil has omega-3s and so on, but it doesn't really convert to the particular type of omega-3s that we want to make up your cell membranes, which are called DHA and EPA. Okay. Which is the full name is eicosapentaenoic acid and docosapentaenoic acid, but that's not important, right? EPA and DHA. And EPA and DHA are primarily found in fatty fish, right?
Like how much fish?
Okay, so it depends on the kind of fish you're eating. Okay. So just before we went on, we were talking about enjoying some shrimp, right?
Yeah, because I was in North Carolina, and that shrimp is amazing.
And while shrimp can be delicious, they're very, very low on the EPA DHA range. Okay, shrimp, crab, cod, some of the more common things that a lot of people like to eat are very low on this list. So we're going to talk about the total amount of DHA and EPA per 3-ounce serving.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I did a calculation, and for you to get from your 6.37 reading up to a 10 where I want you in 3 months, you would need to consume 2,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA combined every day. Okay? So if we were eating fish, a single 3-ounce serving of Atlantic wild salmon is about 1,900 milligrams.
Oh.
Okay? So it's not that tough to do.
Oh,
now,
no, it's not bad. I can
a
do
3-ounce
that.
serving of shrimp, crab, or cod is about 200.
Oh, yeah.
So you would need 20 ounces, so 1.5 pounds a day of those things
That's a lot.
versus 3 ounces of salmon.
Okay,
Right?
so salmon's what I need.
Right. Now I'm going to warn you not to consume farmed salmon or farmed fish in general.
Yeah.
Farm fish is produced in such a way they actually genetically modify it to produce a higher EPA-DHA ratio, but the other things they do to it make it bad. Okay, so making one good thing but doing 10 bad things. So we don't want to do that. So yeah, just leave it at that. Okay. There's an acronym, SMASH. You can smash the Omega3 Index. You can break through this wall by consuming salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. Or just salmon.
Salmon I like. Salmon's cool. I actually like, anchovies no. Yeah.
And it's funny, for me, I grew up on the water, grew up fishing, crab, and clamming. I don't like any of it. I like catching it. I have fun doing it. I don't like eating any of it. But because I know this, I force myself to eat wild salmon 2 to 3 times a week every week, right? Now, on the days in between, I supplement with a high-quality fish or algae oil that is free of mercury and PCBs because you find that in the water a lot. And we want to make sure that the fish is not consuming that. So let's talk about mercury for a second. Tuna, right? Tuna, big fish, can be very high in omega-3s, but there's 5 different kinds of tuna, from bluefin to skipjack to yellowfin to light chunk. And bluefin is the highest in its EPA and DHA ratio, but it's also the highest in mercury.
Oh, right. And we talked
And
about
so that's bad for your brain, right?
Yeah.
So I would not recommend eating tuna every day to get these numbers. Matter of fact, I would say don't eat it more than once a month. Okay. And if you go all the way down the list to canned tuna, like yellowfin or other like chicken of the sea, that's going to be about 300 milligrams, right? So it's not nearly as much as you would get in just getting the wild salmon.
Okay. No,
Right?
that's great. And how do you feel? So you supplement with an oil, but how do you feel about just over-the-counter omega-3?
So again, it depends on the source, right? And I'm always sourcing quality. I'm always vetting things because we know that all supplements are certainly not created equal. And I'll just let you know that the stuff you buy in Walmart and Costco at discount is just that. It's discount supplements. Every supplement line, you may say, but it's the same product line. Yes, and within that product line, they have different grades. And you're getting the bottom of the barrel so they can sell it cheap, which means it has much lower nutrient density and quality. It's like olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is the first pressing. It's full of all the nutrients. Virgin olive oil is the second pressing. It has half as many. No virgin at all, just olive oil, has like 25% of the nutrients.
Right.
So it makes a difference as to the quality. It's all olive oil. It could all be made by the same company, but it's different versions of that. Okay? So I would say to be leery of that. And actually, I'm kind of excited. I'm going to put a little plug in for myself because I just kind of remembered I came out with my own supplement line, including some really good quality fish oil that I just got in last week. So it's all part of my cellular healing cycle that we'll get more into as we go along in our discussions week by week, or month by month, I should say. So there's good places I can tell you to source it from. Okay. And there's a lot of really good brand names. So if anybody would like to reach out to me for any particulars, they're welcome to do that. But one of my favorites is called Brain Armor. Okay. Right? And Brain Armor was created by the doctor who was one of the first guys to talk about concussions in the NFL. Right? And he brought to light the fact that these guys were getting brain damage from tackling. And so he then created a brain armor formula as being the fastest way to restore cellular health in the brain. It just so happens to do it throughout your entire body too. And so that has a great ratio of EPA and DHA, along with vitamin D and vitamin E, which is very important, and something called MCT oil, or medium chain triglyceride oil, which helps all of that get through the blood-brain barrier and into the brain. Because fish oil by itself actually doesn't get into the brain all that well, all by itself. You have to combine it with a few other things.
Okay.
All right. So the easiest way to get that omega-3 up, eat enough fish of the right kind. And on other days that you're not eating fish, you must supplement to get the 2,000 milligrams for you, for your test results. That's not the same for everybody. Some people need 1,000, some people need 500, some people need 5,000. Depends on where you are. Okay? So just guessing at it doesn't really work. You know?
All right. What other tests are out there? What
Okay.
else do we got?
So on this same test, the next thing that we looked at was what's known as the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Now, we said the omega-3 is how strong is your front door. The omega-6 is how big is the mob that's coming. Okay? So omega-6s we call pro-inflammatory. Now, they serve a purpose. We need them. But again, when the ratio is off, they become way too inflammatory to damage the receptors on the cell membrane. Right?
Okay.
So we want that number to be ideally 3-to-1, meaning no more than 3 bad guys for every 1 door, right? So your omega-6 to 3 ratio should really not be above 3-to-1. We'll allow as high as 5-to-1 if we're going to push it. And yours was 6.2-to-1. So you have too many inflammatory bad guys coming to your weak front door. All right?
Why?
Because they come from your diet. And the number one place that this comes from is from consuming too many grains that break down to the sugar and become inflammatory, as well as consuming the wrong kinds of oils or fats. So, and that may not be the case for you. But
How long does it take for your body to adjust? Because when I took that test, I had been on keto for at least a month.
it takes about 3 months.
Okay, because I made changes, so I haven't had a piece of bread in 8 weeks.
So,
I can promise
and I applaud you.
Not even a little quarter of a cracker. I've been really good. You scared me.
I just had Brazilian bites from Trader Joe's, which are these delicious little bread-like things, but it's made out of cheese, and tapioca, which is a plant. It's not grains, okay?
Yeah.
And it tastes like bread. It tastes like cheese bread, and it's okay to have.
Okay.
Right?
But anyway, no, I wanted to ask you because I've tried to make change. I had already made a change.
Yeah.
When I took that blood test. So it's still in me is what you're telling me.
Correct. It takes about 3 months to really make a change, which is why I ask you to do what I ask you to do for 3 months, and then we retest. There's no point in testing sooner than that.
All right. I understand.
Okay? Right. So omega-6s come from grains, and they come from bad oils. And so bad oils are things like sunflower oil, safflower oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil, canola oil, which is not a health oil. It's the margarine version of butter. Okay. So don't believe them when they tell you that's a healthy oil. It's not. Okay. The good oils are coconut oil, avocado oil, grapeseed oil, not rapeseed oil, very different. Grapeseed oil, okay? Nut oils like macadamia nut oil, almond oil, okay? Pumpkin seed oil, flaxseed oil, these are all good.
Yeah.
Now, for cooking purposes, even though those are all good oils, you can make a good oil bad. Olive oil, for example. Olive oil is extra virgin olive oil, fantastic, unless you heat it too much.
Yeah,
and when you do, you start to create a bad fat out of it. The problem is how much is too much. And you don't know, because you can't tell how hot that actually is in the pan.
So just don't bother. Don't cook with it.
So use olive oil as a drizzle on the end for flavor. Use it in your salad dressing. Don't cook with it. Cook with coconut oil, avocado oil, organic pasture butter. These have a very high smoke point. They can be heated up 600, 800, 900 degrees and not turn rancid or go bad. So these are your safe oils to use. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the next number we're going to look at is your AA to EPA ratio. AA stands for arachidonic acid, and EPA is, again, your good front door. Okay. So AA is in that mob. AA are the biggest, baddest guys that just broke out of prison, and they're coming not only to rob your house, they're going to tie you up, set your house on fire, and leave you in it.
Okay, these are really bad dudes.
Really bad dudes.
Okay. Yeah.
So you do not want arachidonic acid. This is the worst of the worst. And just like it comes from the same sources, just more specific, certain types of fats, things like that. But just like we said before, we don't want more than 3 to 1. Absolutely not more than 5 to 1. You are 13.3 to 1.
So bad.
Okay. And because what were you doing before the ketogenic diet?
I was eating bread,
pasta, right? Maybe
you know what I was doing? Well, because I'm a pescatarian and actually almost vegetarian because I really didn't eat that much fish either. But I was eating veggie burgers and all this food that they're telling me I should eat that has all this bad stuff in it.
Because they're processed. You're not ripping a carrot out of the ground and making it into a burger yourself. Right? There's processing involved. In the processing, every time you process a food, you take away some of the nutrients and you add something unnatural in the sake of processing, right? So when we get these veggie burgers, they can have 8 great ingredients and 4 horrible ingredients.
I mean, I was probably eating them every day.
And look back at the labels. I bet you're going to see canola oil. You're going to see canola oil in there. You're going to see safflower and sunflower oil in there, right? You're going to see soybean oil in there. And the food industry thinks these are health foods, right? But they are not. And they cause this bad breakdown to arachidonic acid. Okay.
It's incredible, right? Like you think you're doing a good thing.
Right. So you really, like I'd say, eat real food as much as you can. Stop eating processed food. If it's processed, it's 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be okay. Now, it doesn't mean that real food doesn't come in a package. It can, right? But you know the difference between something that's been processed. If that ingredient list has one word on it, that's real food. Apples.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I have a bag of apples on my counter. That's apples. Okay, organic apples at that. So I'm not going to have the apple-flavored protein bar made with soy protein isolate, which is horrible.
Right. That's the other thing, too. All those healthy bars out there.
Right. There's a lot of things marketed as healthy that really are not healthy.
Yeah, of course.
Right. You really don't want protein isolates. You want the whole food, right? Mm-hmm. Nowhere in nature do we pull out just a portion of the protein. When you do that without the rest of the protein structure, you don't metabolize it the same way.
Yeah.
All right. So it's really important to try to get the whole food as much as you can. So this test showed us that your front door was weak, the mob was too big, and the mob was full of really bad guys. So if you stay on the path you're on, right now you are actively inviting those chronic diseases we talked about. You are actively inviting diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and autoimmune dysfunction. But you can completely turn that around by just eating the right diet and getting the right amount of the special kind of fish oil or algae oil for your body according to your test results, because too much is actually too bad and too little is too bad. So we want to have just the right amount for you. And if you do that, you can completely turn us around and have next to no risk of those things.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've started for sure. Like we talked about, carbs are way down. I'm really trying very hard. It's been 2 months.
Right.
So, I kicked sugar. I did all of that.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's not easy. It's absolutely not easy. And I tell everybody, it's not hard, but it's not easy. It's simple, meaning it's not hard. It's simple things. Just follow a couple of rules, right? But it's not easy because you're addicted.
Well, and I think too, when you told me about my insulin resistance, I thought, oh my gosh, I could get diabetes.
That's very true.
And it kicked me like that. Like I was like, no more sugar. no,
Right.
carbs, no bread, nothing. I mean, it was easy once
Right.
you said that to me.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all that's evil, that all bread and carbs and grains are evil. I'm not saying that at all. But when
Right.
you're inflamed, they certainly are.
Yeah, we need
They
to
are
get the
fuel to the
inflammation
fire.
down
Right.
for sure.
So if the inflammation's down, once every week you can have a little bit of something and it's not going to kill you and you can enjoy that. Get that organic bread, your organic pasta, because if it's not organic, yeah, it's going to kill you because it has the pesticides and herbicides and other crap on. It's going to destroy you eventually because it messes up your gut microbiome. But I mean, when my inflammation's down, I enjoy a good piece of organic bread with some organic butter. That's like heaven. You kidding me? That's great, right?
So, I mean, I'm just thinking, I mean, how many people in this country are inflamed?
Oh, it's an epidemic. It's a
Right?
true. You think COVID's a pandemic? Inflammation's the real pandemic. And as a matter of fact, talking about COVID, what are some of the things that we know that the people who died, the poor people who died, what do they have in common? Well, there's a few things that we found across the board. They had comorbidities, right? The average person that died had 2.6 comorbidities, which means they had heart disease and diabetes, obesity and cancer, right? So these other things that could likely kill them on their own. And how do we say that cancer and diabetes and heart disease start? With inflammation,
Right.
right? So these people are highly inflamed to start with. So bad and so long they developed a secondary disease. Now they get hit with COVID, which seems to thrive on the inflammatory mechanism in the body and cause it to go haywire, right? Even obesity is a common denominator in people who die. And we don't have to look huge to actually be obese. So obese has to do with a ratio of fat in your body. But generally, we look in the mirror and we know if we're in really great shape or not, right? Yeah. Okay? So if you go by the BMI index and height according to weight, the vast majority of Americans are considered obese. Okay?
Well,
And
there's a term called skinny fat.
There is, right? And that's what I call TOFI. Thin outside, fat inside.
Okay.
Right? And that's when we have a certain kind of fat that's not visible from the outside, but it goes inside and wraps around your organs instead. That's called visceral fat. That's one of the things I measure on every new patient in my office using something called bioimpedance. So we measure their visceral fat to see how much of their overall weight is coming from fat actually around their organs. And that is the most dangerous kind because you can't see it, you can't feel it, but it produces chemistry on its own that starts to change your organs and starts to cause kidney disease and liver disease and heart disease. Okay? So the one thing that these people had across the board that died from COVID is obesity. And what causes excess belly fat? Inflammation. Okay? It all comes back to inflammation. Like I said, when you and I were talking earlier, I feel like a broken record. I tell everybody, it all comes back to inflammation over and over and over, one way or another. Something's going to be involving inflammation. Okay? So we want to talk about the chair diet. Okay? Yeah. So how can we, besides just eat fish, what else can we do? So the chair diet, again, stands for cellular healing, anti-inflammatory rotation, because we don't want to be on the same diet for years, because your body is designed to go through seasons, right? And in seasons, there's different food available. So in the middle of winter, do we get a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables?
Yeah,
No, right? So that's probably when we should be more of a meat eater, because we're hunting and catching our food. In the middle of spring and summer, a lot more fish available for fishing, a lot more fruits and vegetables available. So we really should be cycling with the seasons, okay? So on the chair diet, we cycle, and we do seasonal cycling, or every quarter. So you do ketogenic diet for 3 months, then vegetarian diet for 3 months, then paleo diet for 3 months, then pescatarian diet for 3 months, and then you start over, okay? So you get all the benefits of those without lasting so long to see the downside. And you do it to match the seasons. So you start the cycle, if you're in winter where you live, you start that with the vegetarian diet. I'm sorry, with the ketogenic or paleo diet.
Right.
If you're in the summer or spring, you start the vegetarian diet.
Right.
Okay? And then you just go in that cycle from there. Now, in my chair diet, we go a step further and we combine intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting is one of the easiest ways you can bring your inflammation down and rebalance your hormones as fast as possible. And that means not eating less, but eating less often. So you want to only eat within a 7-hour window in your day, whatever 7 hours you choose. So for me, I usually eat my first meal around 2 o'clock in the day, and I eat my dinner around 8 o'clock. Okay? For someone else, they might eat brunch at 11 and dinner at 5. Someone else might like to eat breakfast and then lunch and not eat dinner, right? But you always want to eat within a 7-hour window, giving your body 14 hours to be able to, or more, just to be able to, 14 to 17 hours to be able to just deal with not having to digest. Because we said before, your immune system serves multiple purposes: healing and repair, fighting off foreign organisms, and your body uses enzymes to do those jobs and to aid your white blood cells and your antibodies. It uses enzymes to break down foreign invading organisms. It uses enzymes to heal and repair tissues. So enzymes are catalysts that get things going in your body. Those very same enzymes are used to digest your food. So if you're constantly eating and grazing, you're constantly diverting your enzymes to digestion and never leaving a good amount for healing, repair, and fighting off invading organisms. So you're not going to be as healthy if you're eating a lot all the time. So intermittent fasting gives your immune system a chance to use the enzymes for something else, and also gives your digestive system a break, and you don't have to use the energy expending on digestion. You can expend it on healing and repairing. Okay?
Yeah, that's interesting, because there are many diet plans that are based upon grazing.
Right.
And
now, the only time I recommend that is if someone is already full-blown diabetic. They're going to have a very hard time with intermittent fasting because their body is not able to metabolize sugar when we want it to. They're not able to flip to burning fat as easily. So it takes more work for me to help someone with diabetes get into that cycle. But someone who doesn't have diabetes can do it really easily. Someone with diabetes, it might take us 3 to 6 months to get them into that cycle versus, say, 3 weeks.
Sure.
Right? So, but in general, my experience has told me that all-day grazing does not work well for most people long-term, right? Dr. Walter Longo from the University of Southern California is probably the world's premier researcher on the benefits of intermittent fasting, and he showed all about how it causes longevity. It makes your cells live longer, reduces cancer, right? Even block fasting, going 48 hours without eating, just 2 days, reduces the amount of circulating cancer stem cells in your body by up to 98%. Okay? 2 to 4 days, depending on the person.
Right.
All right? Which is wild.
Yeah.
Why isn't every person with cancer being told, fast for a weekend?
Right.
You know? It's crazy to me. And there's plenty of research on this. Gwyneth Paltrow has a podcast and a show called The Goop.
Yeah.
And on that, she interviewed Walter Longo. And for that time, she took 2 of her assistants and said, for 1 week, 5 days actually, for 5 days, she's going to follow his intermittent fasting protocol. Her one assistant did a full-on pescatarian, and the other one did a full-on vegetarian diet. And they tested biomarkers in their blood for cellular age, of basically how biologically old you were versus chronologically old, right? Because you can age before your time or be younger. And they found that both of her assistants got 6 months younger in 1 week biologically by doing the pescatarian and vegetarian diet. And Gwyneth, who did intermittent fasting, got 2.5 years younger.
What?
Yep. Biologically. Right?
Just for a week.
Just for 5 days. It has profound effects. So, that being said, on my chair diet, besides the rotation of the different types of eating seasonally, we also incorporate the 5-1-1 eating plan of intermittent fasting. 5 days a week, you intermittent fast, meaning only eat within that 7-hour window, whatever 7 hours you want that to be. 1 day a week, you completely fast, just water or bone broth or herbal tea. And then on the last day, you eat 3 meals, okay, and reset the system. So Monday through Friday, I intermittent fast. Saturday, I fast all day. I usually like to have bone broth, which is actually very filling. And then on Sunday, I eat 3 meals. And I eat a lot in those 3 meals. Like this last Sunday's breakfast was 4 organic eggs and 6 pasture-raised sausages with a ton of organic mozzarella in a huge omelet that filled my entire pan. Right?
No pancakes.
Well, yes, there are keto pancakes, paleo pancakes that are grain-free. You can't put syrup on them.
No.
Right? But you can put lots of organic pasture-raised butter on them.
Okay.
And you can fill them up with organic blueberries.
Oh, all this sounds delicious to me.
They're
right
awesome.
now.
You can make organic whipped cream from coconut milk or almond milk and put that on top. It's delightful. I'm telling you.
Look.
It's good.
Yeah,
really
now you're next. We got to get you a cookbook.
No, I just eat what other people make me. So anyway, that's the most important thing to do. Okay, so that is basically what I recommend for the chair eating plan. And I use that with my patients and see phenomenal results.
Wow.
And that will dramatically reduce the inflammation at your cellular level. It will reset your hormones. It'll optimize your fat-burning hormones. It'll optimize blood flow to your brain. It does all kinds of great things.
All right, so let's recap here. I'm supposed to eat wild salmon.
Correct.
And then what was the... I didn't write down for the one that was 13-1. What was that again? What was that called?
So your 13-1 was your AA or arachidonic acid to EPA ratio.
And what do I need to do to fix that?
Just stay away from the grains and eat healthy oils.
Okay. All right.
And avoid unhealthy oils.
Okay.
In your packaged foods. And the very last thing on that test that we looked at was your trans fat number, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't talk about that. And again, the only way you really get that in your body is by eating packaged foods that have that in it. Okay. So your number, we want that to always be below 1, and you were 0.88, right? So you were below 1. So you're doing fine with that. You are avoiding those, and that's good. The average person I see who's eating at McDonald's, let me tell you, that number is up. And that's a heart attack waiting to happen.
Yeah, I don't eat any fast food or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, so that's one good thing.
Absolutely.
I just wasn't eating enough fatty fish, and I was eating bread and veggie burgers. And I really feel like those veggie burgers are the devil.
Yeah, my daughter is vegan. And so I often, she's now in Oregon in grad school, but when she's home, we go to the grocery store together. And I drive her crazy because I read every label, right? So everything she puts in that wagon, I pull it out and read it and go, nope, right? And she's like, but Dad, I eat those all the time. Okay, here's a problem. We have to talk about it. Here's this veggie burger. Here's this all vegan food, which you think automatically means healthy. No, it does not. No. You have to read your ingredients.
No. So, okay, so let's talk about if somebody wants to make an appointment with you.
So it's really easy.
What will they do? How does the process work?
So I named my website something that I hope would be easy to remember for someone who's looking for help from me. It's called drwildcanhelp.com.
Right.
Okay.
And it's right here on the ticker.
Yep, just below. Mm-hmm. I see it down there. Check it out. So if you go to drwildcanhelp.com, the first thing you're going to see at the top is something that says new patients, right? And it's in the menu. If you're doing it on your phone, it'll be in that little hamburger menu. On the laptop, it'll be written out across the top of the screen. And when you hit new patients, it pops up a 4-step plan for you to follow. Right? Step number 1 is book a free consult with me. That's where we can talk about what your health concerns are. I can tell you how I would approach those, and we see if we think we're a good fit for each other. Then step number 2 is we get some testing done. So we stop guessing and start testing, like we're doing with you, right?
Yeah, I had no idea.
Right. And then step number 3 is we target the problem areas based on those tests, and I create a game plan. And step number 4 is we treat. And so we execute that game plan, and then we retest, because the proof is in the pudding.
Sure.
So I want to see not only that you subjectively feel better, but I need to see you're objectively actually better. Okay. So that's how we do it. And that test that we just talked about tonight, the cellular health test, is only $99. And again, that is probably the cheapest test anyone can do with the most profound information available to prevent and even reverse the development of those chronic diseases we talked about. Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, dementia and Alzheimer's, and autoimmunity.
And I have another test that I'm doing, and that one is that a hormone test?
So yes, so that test is a saliva and urine test that's measuring all of your major sex and stress hormones, as well as your neurotransmitters, which are the hormones in your brain that tell your organs and glands what to do.
Yeah.
And that tells us all about your fat metabolism, your sexual health, your ability to metabolize your sugar and your fuel, your stress response, and all these are intimately connected in all of our hormones. It's called a closed system, meaning if you mess up one, you're going to eventually mess up others, like a domino effect. And there are certain groupings that go together really tightly. And one of those groupings is your thyroid function, your sex hormones, your stress hormones, and your sugar metabolism. And if you mess up one of those things, you're going to mess up the others eventually. So if you have a thyroid problem, you're also going to end up with sexual problems, stress hormone problems. If you have a sugar metabolism problem, you're going to end up with a thyroid problem. So everything's going to start to steamroll and snowball. So that test, the other test you're doing is a urine and saliva test for me to look at all of that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, great. I look forward to getting those results as well. But, I have several of my friends in Richmond that have worked with you have said your plan is life-changing.
Awesome.
And
that's what I like to hear.
Yeah. So I'm very excited, and I'm going to continue to be good, and I'm going to get my numbers where they need to be, because
don't make me come up there.
Oh,
you don't want me to have to come to Massachusetts.
I know. No, I will. For sure. Like I said, I've been really good for, I think, about 7 weeks now. It's not that hard. Honestly.
It's really not. Anything is hard at first because you're not used to it. It's different. You have to do things differently. And the first week, there's hurdles to get over. When you start getting off sugar, those first 3 days, you're hangry and you're likely to go postal, right? But once you get over those 3 days, you're like, hey, this is kind of easy. I'm not even hungry.
Well, that's what I was going to say. A lot of times I'll open the refrigerator and I'll just be like, oh, there's really nothing in there I want. It's really incredible how the processed foods and the sugar make you hungrier.
They absolutely do.
They
trigger those same receptors in the brain as heroin, and they make you want more.
Yeah. And so it's really quite obvious to me now that I'm off sugar, that how addictive it is. And I don't want to go back to that. I really don't. Mm-hmm. So, and all right, well, we're going to get my numbers straightened out, and then you're going to help me with the next step when I can start being a little bit more normal and modify my diet. But we got to get me out of inflammation first.
Exactly. And with the hormone test, we kind of jumped a little bit ahead because of some things you told me were happening with you.
Yeah.
So in that cellular healing cycle, I said there's 5 steps. I'm going to run through them real quick and be the last thing I say.
Okay.
So the first step is inflammation.
Yeah.
The second step is foundation. And foundation is restoring digestive function and cellular energy production, which is in the mitochondria. So that's foundational to every aspect of your health and healing. So if you don't get that right, it doesn't matter what you do past that. The third step is detoxification. Okay. So
I wanted to touch on that too.
Yeah. So
okay.
Maybe that's the topic for next time, because I know that we're on an hour and a half, and probably most people are like, I kind of want to leave. So
we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah, we can talk about that next time. After detoxification, we get it into restoration, which is rebalancing the hormones and organs and glands. And we kind of jumped ahead with you with that testing a little bit because of some things you told me. I wanted to see where we stood with that, because I can overlap these steps a little bit. So they don't have to be complete one, then the next. It depends on the person. We want to complete all of these steps, but we can sometimes bridge them together to get you faster results so you feel better, right? So after restoration, the last step in the cycle is regeneration, which is regenerating tissues going forward, cellular health and maintenance, lifelong wellness. What do we need to do at the bare minimum to do that?
Right.
So those are the stages I take someone through.
Great. I look forward to it. I feel better already.
Excellent.
I know. We should probably go though, because it's,
Exactly.
we went over a little bit.
All right. Say bye, Ralphie. All right.
Bye, Ralphie. We will see you next month, and we'll talk about detoxification.
We will. And we'll have your other test results by then. So if you want to go through at that point, we can, or we could go step by step in the cycle and talk about it when we get to that point. Your choice.
Yeah, well, we'll check it out. Okay, folks, drwildcanhelp.com. He will give you a free consultation, and you can start working with this amazing physician to get your cells healthy. So thank you. Have a good night. And,
thank you.
Bye, Ralphie, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
All right. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate just the opportunity to share this information.
Oh, yeah. You're
and
helping
Ralphie
so
appreciates my neck.
I know. You're helping so many people. All righty. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. I'm sorry we went a little bit long tonight, but there's so much information regarding our bodies and cellular health. I'm grateful to Dr. Wild for educating us every single month and trying to get us to heal from the cellular level and live a longer, healthier life. So we have next Tuesday night, we have our guest. It's the 4th of May. We have Michael Rock and Maddie Levine from Fun 107. They're going to be here talking about what's going on at the station. And that should be a really fun show. And then on Tuesday, May 11th, we have our licensed social worker, Andrew Aaron, and he's going to be here talking about spirituality and relationships. So please tune in, and I will see you next week. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.